Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a concept that's less a military strategy and more of an economic hack. It's a pretty radical idea, really. It says we should just stop building these multi-billion-dollar weapons and, start buying disposable tools in bulk. We're talking about the Harbor Freight Doctrine. The sources we've been looking at all point to one critical, really unsustainable problem in modern warfare, and that's the cost-exchange ratio. If you are facing an adversary with a massive industrial base, your high-tech defenses are, well, they're losing the math battle before the fight even starts.
That math is truly fatal. We really have to put a number on it for you to grasp just how severe this is. We're currently in a military environment where you might have, say, a $2 million air defense missile.
$2 million?
Being spent to shoot down a $5,000 drone you could buy off the shelf.
$2 million for $5,000. I mean, that exchange is an economic death spiral. If your enemy can produce those cheap drones, virtually endlessly.
Yeah.
It means the biggest challenge today isn't really about technological superiority.
No, not at all.
It's industrial mass and just budget endurance.
And the sources frame the traditional military approach perfectly using these tool analogies. Our current assets, the F-35s, the sophisticated Aegis destroyers, the massive Ford-class carriers, these are the snap-on tools of warfare. They're exquisite, high quality, built for decades of precise service. They're the absolute best money can buy.
And crucially, they're so painful to lose. If a war of attrition forces you to trade a $100 million asset for a $100,000 countermeasure, your budget and then your whole strategy, it just collapses.
The Harbor Freight Doctrine is the strategic realization that we have to move away from that snap-on mentality completely. We need assets that are cheap, easily replaced, good enough for the mission, and this part is key, completely disposable. The cost of replacing the asset has to be negligible. That's how you neutralize the enemy's economic leverage.
So the mission for you today is to understand this conceptual economic hack, how moving from precision to sheer volume is designed to defeat these incredibly expensive modern air defenses. It's about solving the financial problem before you even get to the kinetic one. All right, so let's pivot and look at the first crucial element, the economics of disposable mass.
The foundational shift here is abandoning the entire idea of specialized military platforms. The doctrine doesn't call for new classes of warships or anything like that. It calls for civilian conversion.
Unpack that conversion strategy for us. We're not talking about just camouflage, right? We're talking about repurposing global infrastructure that already exists.
Exactly. This is what the sources call the hidden in plain sight strategy. Instead of building gray, radar-reflecting warships that basically announce their presence from miles away, the doctrine proposes leveraging standard civilian platforms that are already out there, traversing global shipping lanes every single day. The best examples are things like a massive Boeing 777 freighter or just a common Maersk-style container ship.
And the genius there is, well, it's twofold. First, industrial speed. You're building off existing high-volume production lines. And second, to enemy radar, these massive things just look like what they are.
Harmless
Civilian traffic.
Yeah.
Go delivering sneakers and TVs.
And they are harmless civilian traffic until the moment they're not. Inside those standard cargo bays or those 40-foot shipping containers are thousands of low-cost, disposable suicide drones just ready to be deployed. The sheer volume is what makes the economics of it all work.
But this introduces a really fascinating non-kinetic weapon, uncertainty. How does this uncertainty become a strategic asset in itself?
It creates a massive deterrent effect. It forces the enemy into what is essentially an impossible choice. Think about the Pacific Theater, for example. An enemy just cannot afford, economically or politically, to start shooting down every single cargo ship or commercial airliner that passes through its area of operation. The global economy would grind to a halt, immediately.
And that's the relevance for you, the listener. The adversary has to make a decision that's way more complex than just targeting a dedicated warship. They have to operate under this constant kind of paralyzing uncertainty of whether a normal commercial vessel is carrying clothing or 5,000 drones.
And that uncertainty basically weaponizes the global trade system itself. If you can hide military capability inside the normal, accepted structures of global commerce, you multiply the cost and complexity for the adversary beyond measure. And that transition to civilian conversion means the manufacturing pipeline is just radically faster and cheaper. You're using existing industrial capacity. It's like pivoting from a niche supercar builder to just mass-producing Honda Civics.
Okay, so we've established the economic need and this idea of civilian conversion. Now let's pivot to how this actually translates into into tactical superiority. This brings us to the operational side of it all. Tactical advantages and the saturation equation.
Right. So this strategy moves from defense to offense by leveraging geography. The sources really highlight that for a major industrial power, especially one concentrated along a coastline, geography becomes a huge operational vulnerability.
Yeah, if you look at major competitors, their industrial heartlands, the manufacturing base, the big trade hubs, the population centers, they're all heavily concentrated right on the coasts. They're incredibly vulnerable to attacks launched from the sea.
And this leads right to the core, simple math equation of the doctrine. The concept is pure quantitative attrition. You deploy converted civilian platforms safely out in the open ocean, well outside the immediate threat zone, and then you launch a massive saturation swarm. The sources talk about numbers like 10,000, maybe even 20,000 cheap drones, all targeting that coastal infrastructure at the same time.
But wait, isn't relying on simple math just ignoring the enemy's ability to, adapt or jam the entire swarm? What ensures these numbers can actually overcome sophisticated defenses?
That's where the concept of the forcing function comes in. We're not necessarily expecting every single drone to hit its target. That's not the point. The sheer volume is the weapon. It forces the defense to make one agonizing, immediate choice. Do we spend our expensive, limited supply air defense missiles on this swarm, or do we just let it through?
The financial calculation there is just brutal. If the defender is shooting down $5,000 assets with $2 million missiles, they are guaranteed to empty their magazines and bankrupt their defense budget long before the attackers run out of drones.
Exactly.
The doctrine succeeds the second the defense runs out of missiles and the coast is just left exposed.
It's a purely quantitative strategy. It completely bypasses the need for high-end kinetic excellence. It shifts the entire focus away from individual skill and towards logistical infrastructure. The requirement is not for the ace pilot. The requirement is for superior distribution.
Wait, so you're telling me we're talking about literally repurposing the infrastructure that delivers my laundry detergent and my Amazon packages into a high-speed military delivery system? That's an incredible concept shift.
It's profound. The plan relies on leveraging the massive existing American supply chain. Think about the infrastructure of FedEx, the logistics hubs of Amazon, the freighter fleets of Boeing. Instead of defense contractors struggling to build bespoke launch systems in low volume, you just use these civilian giants that move cargo at unbelievable speeds and scale.
So the implication is that the fastest, cheapest delivery service wins the war. It completely redefines what military readiness even means in the 21st century.
Yeah.
But this brings us back to a massive challenge, right? If your hardware is designed to be cheap and disposable and you flood the market with it, how do you maintain your technological edge? How do you prevent that core tech from being copied or, even worse, turned against you? This is the paradox of cheap tech.
And you've hit on the single most important control issue for any mass production military strategy. The answer, as presented in the source material, is a really sophisticated separation of the physical hardware from the proprietary intelligence. The strategy dictates a two-part solution. First, the physical hardware, the drone airframe, the basic motor. It should be manufactured to be as generic and simple as possible. The sources describe it as the military equivalent of a box cutter. This is the mass-producible part that you can export globally to allies without any hesitation, precisely because the components themselves hold almost no proprietary value.
So the body is simple, but the brain is locked down. The core technological advantage has to reside entirely in the software, the AI, and the mission control systems.
Precisely. The AI remains the crown jewel of U.S. technology, and it's controlled remotely via the cloud or some other secure command network. This separation lets the U.S. maximize its disposable mass strategy all over the globe, funding its own infrastructure by selling the shells, while keeping the critical operational intelligence centralized.
Okay, so this leads to the specific control mechanism that the sources call the digital monkey model. It's memorable, but how does this system actually enforce that technological control?
The digital monkey model is basically a system of tiered, enforceable access. If you're dealing with a close, highly trusted ally, they might get full, high-speed access to the AI's advanced networking and targeting algorithms. But for, let's say, less trusted allies, the U.S. can intentionally restrict or downgrade the AI capabilities. It gives them a less effective version that performs basic functions but lacks that high-end, networked intelligence that makes a swarm truly deadly.
And what happens if that ally changes allegiance or if there's a risk of a tech breach?
This is the genius of the model. Because the intelligence is remote and it's all software defined, the control mechanism allows the U.S. to effectively brick it entirely. The hardware immediately becomes worthless because its operational intelligence can be revoked with a single keystroke.
That's a huge leap in export control. I mean, traditional hardware-based export restrictions are slow and they're leaky. This makes the weapon useless instantaneously if control is lost.
It solves the massive problem of technology diffusion that plagues most military export systems. The U.S. can flood the world with American-made disposable assets, increasing its industrial volume and global influence, while guaranteeing that its core technological lead, the software, remains secure, non-transferable, and recoverable at any moment.
So to synthesize this massive strategic overhaul as we start to wrap up, we're talking about a fundamental economic and industrial shift in how conflicts are waged.
Absolutely. The sources make a really clear declaration here. The era of the individual ace pilot and these bespoke, exquisite, expensive military platforms, it is definitively over. The future is defined by disposable mass. We are strategically prioritizing the cost exchange over individual quality, making it financially impossible for an adversary to win an attrition war.
And the power of this doctrine is all in its financial leverage. We've established that a single Maersk container ship loaded with 5,000 network drones creates exponentially more strategic pressure.
So much more.
More cost exhaustion, more paralyzing uncertainty than an entire carrier strike group, and for a microscopic fraction of the operating budget. This is why the Harbor Freight Doctrine isn't just a new way to fight. It's framed as an economic hack designed to systematically bankrupt the enemy's defense budget. It weaponizes abundance against scarcity.
When you look at future defense spending, you have to understand that the metrics are changing. We're moving from counting high-value assets to calculating the opponent's missile expenditure curve.
So here is the final provocative thought for you to consider based on this radical shift. Since the core mechanism of the Harbor Freight Doctrine aims to blur the lines, to leverage commercial giants like FedEx and Amazon to deliver military capability, to hide the arrow within the shipping label, when does the line between commercial supply chain operations and military logistics completely disappear? And what does that mean for global trade security when every major cargo ship, every international flight, every logistics hub is potentially viewed through this lens of weaponized uncertainty?
That integration is the ultimate test of the doctrine, and it's the new economic equation everyone has to factor into their understanding of global strategy. The cost of admission to future conflict is shifting dramatically, and it will be measured in container loads, not in the price tag of a single fighter jet.